So part 2, chapter 2. Another day, another convertible, and another hotel full of cops. The first order of business was to get rid of the red shark. It was too obvious, too many people might recognize it, especially the Vegas police. Although as far as they knew, the thing was already back home in LA. It was last seen running at top speed across Death Valley on Interstate 15, stopped and warned in Baker by the CHP, then suddenly disappeared. The last place they would look for it, I felt, was in a rental car lot at the airport. I had to go out there anyway to meet my attorney, who would be arriving from LA in the late afternoon. I drove very quietly on the freeway, gripping my normal instinct for bursts of acceleration and sudden lane changes, trying to remain inconspicuous, and when I got there I parked the Shark between two old Air Force buses in a utility lot about half a mile from the terminal. Very tall buses, make it hard as possible for the fuckers. A little walking never hurt anybody. By the time I got to the terminal I was pouring sweat, but nothing abnormal. I tend to sweat heavily in warm climates. My clothes are soaking wet from dawn to dusk. This worried me at first, but when I went to a doctor and described my normal daily intake of booze, drugs, and poison, he told me to come back when the sweating stopped. That would be the danger point, he said, a sign that my body's desperately overworked flushing mechanism had broken down completely. I have a great faith in the natural processes, he said, but in your case, well, I find no precedent. We'll just have to wait and see, then work with what's left. I spent about 2 hours in the bar, drinking Bloody Marys for the V8 nutritional content and watching the flights from LA. I'd eaten nothing but grapefruit for about 20 hours and my head was adrift from its moorings. You better watch yourself, I thought. There are limits to what the human body can endure. You don't want to break down and start bleeding from the ears right here in the terminal, not in this town. In Las Vegas, they kill the weak and deranged. I realized this and kept quiet even when I felt symptoms of a terminal blood sweat coming on. But this passed. I saw the cocktail waitress getting nervous, so I forced myself to get up and walk stiffly out of the bar. No sign of my attorney. Down to the VIP car rental booth where I traded the red Shark in for a white Cadillac convertible. This goddamn Chevy has caused me a lot of trouble, I told him. I get the feeling that people are putting me down, especially in gas stations when I have to get out and open the hood manually. Well, of course, said the man behind the desk. What you need, I think, is one of our Mercedes 600 Town Cruiser specials with air conditioning. You can even carry your own fuel if you want. We'll make that available. Do I look like a goddamn Nazi, I said? I'll have a natural American car, or nothing at all. They called up the white Coupe de Ville at once. Everything was automatic. I could sit in the red leather driver's seat and make every inch of the car jump by touching the proper buttons. It was a wonderful machine, 10 grand worth of gimmicks and high-priced special effects. The rear windows leaped up with the touch like frogs in a dynamite pond. The white canvas top ran up and down like a roller coaster. The dashboard was full of esoteric lights and dials and meters that I would never understand, but there was no doubt in my mind that I was into a superior machine. The caddy wouldn't get off the line quite as fast as a red Shark, but once it got rolling, around 80, it was pure smooth hell. All that elegant, upholstered weight lashing across the desert was like rolling through midnight on the old California Zephyr. I handled the whole transaction with a credit card that I later learned was canceled, completely bogus. But the big computer hadn't mixed me yet, so I was still a fat gold credit risk. Later, looking back on this transaction, I knew the conversation that had almost certainly ensued. Hello, this is VIP Car Rentals in Las Vegas. We're calling to check on number 875-045-616B. Just a routine credit check, nothing urgent. Long pause at the other end, then, holy shit, what? Pardon me, yes, we have that number. It's been placed on emergency red line status. Call the police at once, and don't let him out of your sight. Another long pause. Well, you see, that number is not on our current red list, and number 875-045-616B just left our lot in a new Cadillac convertible. No. Yes, he's long gone, totally insured. Where? I think he said St. Louis. Yes, that's what the card says. Raul Duke, left fielder and batting champion of the St. Louis Browns, 5 days at $25 per, plus 25 cents a mile. His card was valid, so of course we had no choice. This is true. The car rental agency had no legal reason to hassle me since my card was technically valid. During the next 4 days, I drove that car all over Las Vegas, even passing the VIP agency's main office on Paradise Boulevard several times, and at no time was I bothered by any show of rudeness. This is one of the hallmarks of Vegas hospitality. The only bedrock rule is don't burn the locals. Beyond that, nobody cares. They would rather not know. If Charlie Manson checked into the Sahara tomorrow morning, nobody would hassle him, as long as he tipped big. I drove straight to the hotel after renting the car. There was still no sign of my attorney, so I decided to check in on my own, if only to get off the street and avoid a public breakdown. I left the whale in a VIP parking slot and shambled self-consciously into the lobby with one small leather bag, a handcrafted, custom-built satchel that had just been made for me by a leathersmith friend in Boulder. Our room was at the Flamingo in the nerve center of the Strip, right across the street from Caesar's Palace in the Dunes, site of the drug conference. The bulk of the conferees were staying at the Dunes, but those of us who signed up fashionably late were assigned to the Flamingo. The place was full of cops. I saw this at a glance. Most of them were just standing around trying to look casual, all dressed exactly alike in their cut-rate Vegas casuals, plaid Bermuda shorts, Arnie Palmer golf shirts, and hairless white legs tapering down to rubberized beach sandals. It was a terrifying scene to walk into, a super stakeout of some kind. If I hadn't known about the conference, my mind might have snapped. You got the impression that somebody was going to be gunned down in a blazing crossfire at any moment, maybe the entire Manson family. My arrival was badly timed. Most of the national DAs and other cop types had already checked in. These were the people who now stood around the lobby and stared grimly at newcomers. What appeared to be the final stakeout was only about 200 vacationing cops with nothing better to do. They didn't even notice each other. I wadded up to the desk and got in line. The man in front of me was a police chief from some small town in Michigan. His new-style wife was standing about 3 feet off to his right while he argued with the desk clerk. "Look, fella, I told you I have a postcard here that says I have reservations in this hotel. Hell, I'm with the district attorney's conference. I've already paid for my room. Sorry, sir, you're on the late list. Your reservations were transferred to the, Moonlight Hotel, which is out on Paradise Boulevard, and actually a very fine place of lodging and only 16 blocks from here, with its own pool and..." "You dirty little faggot, call the manager. I'm tired of listening to this dog shit." That's what the cop said. The manager appeared and offered to call a cab. This was obviously the second or maybe even the third act in a cruel drama that had begun long before I showed up. The police chief's wife was crying. The gaggle of friends that he'd mustered for support were too embarrassed to back him up. Even now, in this showdown at the desk with this angry little cop firing his best and final shot, they knew he was beaten. He was going against the rules, and the people hired to enforce those rules said no vacancy. After 10 minutes of standing in line behind this noisy little asshole and his friends, I felt the bile rising. Where did this cop of all people get the nerve to argue with anybody in terms of right and reason? I had been there with these fuzzy little shitheads, and so I sensed had the desk clerk. He had the air of a man who'd been fucked around in his time by a fairly good cross-section of mean-tempered, rule-crazy cops. So now he was just giving their argument back to them. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong, man, or who's paid his bill and who hasn't. What matters right now is that for the first time in my life, I can work out on a pig. Fuck you, officer. I'm in charge here, and I'm telling you, we don't have room for you. He just kind of like, he's depicting the mentality like, oh, now he has authority over the police, so he's using it. I was enjoying this whip song, but after a while I felt dizzy, bad, nervous, and my impatience got the better of my amusement. So I stepped around the pig and spoke directly to the desk clerk. "Say," I said, "I hate to interrupt, but I have a reservation, and I wonder if maybe I could just sort of slide through and get out of your way." I smiled, letting him know I'd been digging his snake bully act on the cop party that was now standing there, psychologically off balance and staring at me like I was some kind of water rat crawling up to the desk. I looked pretty bad, wearing old Levi and white Chuck Taylor All-Star basketball sneakers, and my 10-peso Acapulco shirt had long since come apart at the shoulder seams from all that road wind. My beard was about 3 days old, bordering on standard wino trim, and my eyes were totally hidden by Sandy Bull's Saigon mirror shades. But my voice had the tone of a man who knows he has a reservation. I was gambling on my attorney's foresight, but I couldn't pass the chance to put the horn into a cop. And I was right, the reservation was in my attorney's name. The desk clerk hit his bell to summon the bag boy. "This is all I have with me right now," I said. "The rest is out there in that white Cadillac convertible." I pointed to the car that we could all see parked just outside the front door. "Can you have somebody drive it around to the room?" The desk clerk was friendly. "Don't worry about a thing, sir. Just enjoy your stay here. And if there's anything you need, just call the desk." I nodded and smiled, half watching the stunned reaction of the cop crowd right next to me. They were stupid with shock. Here they were arguing with every piece of leverage they could command for a room they'd already paid for, and suddenly their whole act gets sideswiped by some crusty drifter who looks like something out of an upper Michigan hobo jungle, and he checks in with a handful of credit cards. Jesus, what's happening in this world? That's funny. That's fucking funny.